And welcome everybody to the 19th episode of Placed in Shelter. Your host Ryan Catarozoli here. And today we're going to start off with a little quarantine update. As if things couldn't get a whole lot worse here, stuck in my house. Now we've got Brett Favre, who obviously living in Wisconsin has been one of my idols my whole life. He's now come out and said that the Packers have burned a bridge with Aaron Rodgers. And he goes on to say things like, they didn't draft any weapons, and he has every right to be upset. And he doesn't believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to finish his career here in Green Bay. Well, to some of you who aren't Green Bay Packer fans, that might be good news. But to us here in Green Bay, the last thing that we want is dissension with our Green Bay Packers. So we were one game away from the Super Bowl, and I feel like we're not that many pieces away. So I'm hoping that LaFleur and Rodgers and upper management can put aside their differences and figure out a way to put on another successful year. But with that, just want to let you know my pain. I do want to get in today's episode, but first, another reminder, tomorrow's episode, Friday, is going to be a new episode called Stump the Chumps, and we're bringing in the bigwigs this time. We're bringing in David Ralston, Mike Whiteley, and Mark Pomfret. So again, we're anticipating a lot of questions coming in. If you do want to get your questions in early to make sure we get to them, placedinshelter@gmail.com. Otherwise, you can show up as always, and we'll have the chat open for live questions at the time. But have some good ones prepared. Obviously, something relevant to do with Hatco, Hatco's business, food warming, and a few fun questions here and there as long as they're appropriate. If you are watching today on YouTube, you can always catch us live and be a part of the conversation, 3 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. You can utilize the link below in the description. It will take you directly into our Zoom meeting. And with that, let's start out the show today. And today, I want to call this the next level. So what we're talking about here is going to be the next level of toasting. In a previous episode, we talked about the TQ3 conveyor toaster, and we talked about how it was setting itself apart from other conveyor toasters. And just as a brief recap, if you remember, the TQ3 does take it to a different level with conveyor toasters because it's able to do different products on the fly. With the combination of the color guard and the programmability, you can actually change recipes on the fly. Now, we did talk about a few things that it's not capable of. And a couple of those struggles would be, number one, the TQ3 does not have any kind of voltage regulation. And you might be wondering why that's important. Well, if you have a customer that decides they have, call it 10 different recipes for 10 different products, whether they're English muffins, bagels, white toast, wheat toast, a specialty bread, if you will, when you program that in one particular location, as you move from store to store, especially if it's a regional chain or a national chain, you're going to get different power coming in through the wall. And it's going to be close, plus or minus 5%. But again, like we talked about in a previous conversation, that 5% might be a second or two in toast time, leaving you either under toast or over toast. So that's one of the struggles. The next one is you have to actually program each unit at the store because of that power regulation. The conveyor speed on the TQ3 is adjustable, but it's only going to move in one direction, and you're going to change the speed of it, but you're not going to change any direction on the conveyor. And then last but not least is it's a single conveyor toaster, so you don't have any versatility. So who's the customer that needs to take it to the next level? Oftentimes, we're going to see a customer that has many different products, and a lot of times they're freshly baked, freshly done at a commissary, and then sent out to the stores. But the basis is they're going to have multiple different products. Again, whether that's English muffins, bagels, specialty breads, they may have a different specialty bread every day. But that customer that's going to be going through a lot of product. The customer that has a lot of locations. Again, we talked about having locations both regionally and nationally and not wanting to go through having to tweak each individual store. How about the customer that's looking to finish products? Maybe it's not just toasting. Maybe it's an open-faced sandwich. Perhaps it's melting cheese. You know what? I've actually even seen the toaster that I'm about to talk about do frozen French fries. where it goes in and comes back out. So you have a little bit more needs than just toasting product. You're going to have volume, a ton of volume, and then also different products at the same time. So if they've got a busy lunch rush or a morning rush and they want to be doing multiple products at the same time, the TQ3 is going to struggle with that because they're not going to be able to do as much as it is required. So what does that take us to? Well, the next level of toasting here at Hatco is going to be our ITQ series, which is our intelligent toast quick toasters. And it does benefit from a lot of the same things we talked about with the TQ3, with the color guard option. But today, because of time, I want to talk about some of the big features that takes it to the next level. And the first thing is voltage regulation. Again, we talked about how important that was, where it's going to change recipes from store to store. With the ITQ, we can program this in from the factory with your ideal settings, and you're going to get the same toast profile when it gets sent out nationally, regionally, even globally. So voltage regulation is very important. You do have the option here for a double conveyor belt. So what's really cool about the double conveyor belt is this comes in combination with 20 different programs, okay? So now I can do different products at the same time with the same piece of equipment. Like you see here in the picture, I have white bread on one conveyor belt and an English muffin on another. So this gives me the versatility that I'm looking for. Now we pair that with different belt options. So we're going to talk about the different styles and the way this belt actually works. So the very first one is going to be the continuous mode. This is what everybody's familiar with. It's the conveyor style toaster where you choose a recipe and that conveyor is just going to continually run. Okay, pretty basic. Everybody's seen that before. But now let's talk about another one, and that's called staging mode. This has the ability to do a staging mode because it has our spot on technology, which has the eyes on each of the belts. So here's a very real world application. I might be having this set up at a breakfast store, and we're doing white bread by the plate. Everybody that gets breakfast gets white bread, and I need to go through a lot of it. Well, rather than purchasing a second toaster for my specialty items like English muffins, like bagels, I can have one conveyor working continuously, and then on the opposite conveyor, using the spot-on technology, when a product is placed on the belt, the unit will beep and say, I need a recipe, and you choose English muffin. It'll run an English muffin. And then the next thing that comes up is a specialty bread that has a different toast profile. You put that on the conveyor belt. The eyes say, what's the recipe? You choose the recipe, it'll run that one through. So this gives you the volume at the same time as the versatility. And then the last option that we have is what's called an in and then out. So with the in and out option, this is where we start talking about finishing products. This isn't just about toasting. This could be melting cheese on sandwiches, doing open face sandwiches. You can either do it directly on the conveyor, or we have an option for a paddle. And the paddle will be placed on the conveyor belt. It will slide into the unit for whatever the duration is of the program, and then it will slide it back out, and your open face sandwich is done. Or like I said, I've actually experimented with frozen French fries and had great results doing it that way. It's not going to give you huge batches. You're not going to get away with eliminating a fryer or a fry holding station. But if you were to do smaller batch items like that, it is something that is available. And then last but not least, we want to talk about the ease of operation with this. So it's very, very low maintenance. Other than wiping off the spot-on technology where the eyes are every once in a while, it will also give you a warning indicator if it is becoming dumped up, if you will, or butter or certain things have migrated to that spot-on technology. It will tell you that it needs to be cleaned. But outside of that, it's virtually maintenance-free when we talk about a no-maintenance motor as well as conveyor drives on this toaster. So when your customer is looking to take it to the next level and really get into some versatility, the ITQ toaster is the way to go. And with that, that's going to wrap up today's talk. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And as always, if you use the function on the bottom where it says chat, now is the time where we can ask and answer any of your questions. So let's take a look and see how chat's doing so far today. Robin Yount said it's awful. That must have been in conjunction with my talk about Green Bay. Brett's been out in the sun on his tractor too long. You know what? He's still near and dear to my heart. I love me some Brett Favre. You know, I had to eat a lot of crow because when Brett Favre was dangling retirement and there were some issues and we had Aaron Rodgers, and he even thought about not retiring and playing again, I was in the band of roll out the red carpet, fly to Mississippi, bring this guy back. And when the Packers had Rodgers for the first year, I think we were like 4-12. I went around touting how smart I was. Turned out I was the dumbest guy in the room because Aaron Rodgers turned out to be possibly one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. So I have to eat crow once in a while, and I admit that. Bruce, does the ITQ need to go under a hood? Bruce, that's a really good question. It really depends on local code, and I know everybody hates that answer because it's used so often, but it's true. Depending upon which area of the country you're in, toasters have been required to be put underneath of a hood. Now, I've also seen them go in without having to go under a hood. So I can't tell you one way or the other whether or not it has to have a hood, but do know that the temperatures get rather hot and it does have heat coming out of it. And if you leave product in too long, I guarantee you can start it on fire. So I would look at local code, but if used properly like any other toaster, it really shouldn't have a ton of grease-laden vapor in the air. So I will leave the answer with that. Mark Pumfret, he is not the GOAT. I know, but your GOAT is now in Tampa Bay at Pastures, so we'll see how that goes for you. Nick, if you have multiple units side by side, is there a recommended clearance between them? That is an excellent question, and I will have to get that. In fact, actually, Dale had done some testing with one of his chains where we actually put them on top of one another. So the clearance is really going to be required where the controller is, because you don't want the hot air getting into the intake for the controller. That seems to be where the clearance is needed most. I know in our documentation we have clearance required for combustible surfaces, but when we post this video on YouTube, I will make sure in the descriptions that we add the clearance needed when putting side by side. Excellent question. Mike, what's the most common field failure issue and what can operators do to prevent this common failure? Mike, I'm not sure which failure you're talking about. Typically, from what I've seen in the field, one of the biggest issues is not cleaning the spot on technology with the where the eyes are properly. The other one that I'll see from time to time is the actual conveyor belt itself. It doesn't need a ton of maintenance, but it does need to be cleaned off at some point. If you leave scraps and pieces on there, for example, if you were to do a bagel, like I'm thinking of an apple crisp type bagel where it has some sugary content to it, that sometimes will get collected on the belt itself. And then as the belt is going through, those pieces that are stuck to it could spark up a little fire and then change the toast profile there. So cleaning off the belt would be what I see the most. Mike, did you have another failure that I wasn't thinking of? They should keep the toasters 6 feet apart. During social distancing, all toasters must be 6 feet apart. That's good. That is good. Oh, Dan, excellent point, Dan. Actually, that's very true because I've seen that with the TQ3 toasters as well. Dan said in chat that one of the most common things he sees is cleaning the air intake screen. Yes, 100% true. If you do have this, especially anywhere near a flat top, a bank of fryers, that grease-laden vapor is in the air, and you would not believe how clogged up those air filters can get. They do need to be removed and cleaned out from time to time. Thank you, Dan. That was excellent. And there it was, Mike. Mike nailed it. So, all right. I always try to stay 6 feet away from Bears fans. Ooh, shots fired. And Brian, here we go. Brian actually, with Johnson Pike, he has mentioned that the 2-inch legs help big time with airflow as well. So you want to make sure that the airflow can get underneath the legs, especially if placed in a hotter area of the kitchen. Well, awesome. I think that's going to wrap up our question and answers. Great questions today, guys. Thank you again for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube and want to join us in part of the conversation, you can always use the link to join us live 3 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday. If you use the bell notification at the bottom, you can be alerted every time that we post new videos. and show us you're liking the content by simply liking, sharing, and subscribing. So thanks everybody, and we're ready for a real big episode tomorrow.